So I usually turn this on for about 2 hours of the class, and then I post it on the web on my blog, where I also post the quiz questions I will ask each night, so that if you miss class for something, you'll be able to, there will be no excuse. You'll still be able to see the video, so you'll still have to suffer, and you'll get the quiz questions, so you can still continue to interact as if you were here. So when I was in the military, I was stationed at Fort Ridge. I had a platoon of young people, and the Army encouraged them to take college courses. They would sign up for courses and start going, and then the Army would say, hey, we want you to go to some really cold place for about 3 weeks, and then bring you back. And then the teacher would say, F for you, because you weren't here. And that was like, well, no, you shouldn't do that. That was their job. They had to go. But no, it didn't persuade them. So I figured, well, if I ever get to teach here, I would never put soldiers in that kind of a situation. I would always make sure there's a way they can still get an A for the course, because otherwise you have to pay for it yourself, right? Plus you didn't get it, so there's all sorts of reasons. And I can't just treat soldiers that way, so of course everybody gets that benefit. Good? Yes? Plus, if we have really icy conditions and you live in Wasilla or Palmer, I don't want you to die trying to get here. That's counterproductive. And I'm not at the point yet where you can take the class with an Oculus Rift, but it might be just a few years we'll be able to do that. So these are the kinds of questions I ask. They're essay questions. No yes or no answers on all of this. And you can have differences of opinion. I expect you will, especially of my opinion. My opinion's pretty weird. So you're welcome to have a difference of opinion from what I say. I'm not going to argue that I'm right. And if you don't give me exactly what I say back. So if you're from Asia, and that's the way your educational experience has been so far, that your job as a student is to memorize everything I say and then give it back to me in my essays, that's not what I'm looking for. That's not what's called an American education. Your job is to disagree with everything I say. Because of Socrates being an asshole, taught young people to do that. And he's become our patron saint of critical thinking, so there you go. All right, so 3 tests go like that. Then I have a term paper, 25% of the grade. So don't forget the term paper, because that would mean you'd only get a C, because you forgot. And that's 3,000 words. And again, same process. I'll get your term paper. I'll check the properties, 3,003 words. Yay, A for you, and then I read it. We will kind of do emails back and forth as you're writing the paper, though. So initially I'll ask you what your topic is. Who did you pick, right? And I have a list of people. Or do I? I guess it's just basically who's interesting to you in the course as we go. So those are pretty much the people I'm looking for. But you can pick others. If you have a more contemporary person that you're interested in, you can pick them too. But do email me if it's someone I don't have on the syllabus or something. Especially if it's Ayn Rand. If it's Ayn Rand, I always say no, and the student insists, so I say okay. But she's a popular philosopher still today, but she's kind of pop philosophy, not serious philosophy. Does that make sense? I don't know if anyone's... Do you know who I'm talking about? Yes? No? Trump knows. President Trump knows who Ayn Rand is. So that's just interesting. She mostly wrote novels, but she has some philosophical works too. But no one in academia whatever you call universities, those places of higher learning. How high up it is. It depends on the buildings, I guess. You know, what floor the class is on. Those are supposed to be jokes. But you get the idea. And no one really treats her seriously. So that irritates a lot of people. Plagiarism is fun, I should mention. Frankly, I don't know what plagiarism is. It's basically what we do, because everything we learn from someone else, and then when we do something, we're basically plagiarizing what we learned from them. The most famous event, I guess, was J.K. Rowling being sued by people for plagiarizing their work, and the court in England decided that she did not plagiarize. She copied their work, but it wasn't plagiarism. You know, in a sense, if you just copy, I had one student send me a term paper where she wrote on St. Paul. And what she did was she started out by saying, St. Paul said this, and she quoted one of his epistles. And she said, and then he said this, and she quoted another epistle, and another one, and another. And so basically her whole term paper was St. Paul. So I emailed her and I said, well, I sent St. Paul his A, but you still have to write your term paper, right? You know? 'Cause, you know, immersion means you're the one that's thinking up this stuff, right? You know, not just quoting St. Paul. You know, St. Paul. I can't disagree with St. Paul. I'm a Roman Catholic, you know, and the Pope would shoot me, or actually burn me at the stake. Was more popular, you know. So I'm just kidding. Pope Francis would never burn anyone at the stake, unless they really deserved it. So what is plagiarism? Well, I quoted, this is actually, I plagiarized this. From Wikipedia, you know, and actually it was Encarta. And if you click on this link, it doesn't go there anymore because Encarta's dead now. You know, it used to be like Microsoft's encyclopedia, and they gave up because Wikipedia beat the crap out of them. That's what happened. By the way, you could use Wikipedia as a resource. I know a lot of professors say, oh, Wikipedia, oh, I can't use that. And I'm like, you know, that's the example of democracy in action. Everybody can add to Wikipedia. Well, you know, they limit some of the articles, like Israel. You know, if you try to, you know, go on and Wikipedia and describe Israel or something, no, you can't do it. They'll limit it because there was this constant fight back and forth between the Palestinians and the Israelis over what Israel was, right? You know, so someone had to come in and be the arbiter, you know, of what's going on that site. And there's a lot of sites that are like that. So Wikipedia does have restrictions on some things. But in any case, this is, I think, true. There's nothing new under the sun, right? You've heard that expression. It's from Ecclesiastes, the Bible, right? If you click on this, by the way, it loads forever because it's the whole dang Bible. So that's not a very good link to use, actually, for that. Because then you have to go to Ecclesiastes to find it. I didn't do a good job in putting that link there. But I think this is true, although I think the woman who wrote Ecclesiastes had to be plagiarizing. Either that or she was wrong. So if you think about it, if she was the first one to say there's nothing new under the sun, that was new, so she was wrong. But if she copied it from some other source, then she was right. You know, so I think she was. And how many of you are mad at me for referring to the woman that wrote Ecclesiastes? no biblical scholars in the room. Okay, I get away with that. Now there's the argument that it was one of Solomon's daughters actually wrote Ecclesiastes, so that's kind of okay. This is a quote, and you can see how this works. Because we got quotations before and at the end, right? So you can quote that way, but you still give the link from where you got it from. I picked this particular quote because he plagiarizes Ecclesiastes. So if you see in this article, he refers to there's nothing new under the sun. He doesn't quote Ecclesiastes. So there are some expressions that we think are so commonly known, you don't have to give your source for those, right? Like if you say Descartes said cogito ergo sum, which you probably won't because we're not going to cover Descartes. But if you did, no one has to actually find a resource where they could say that came from, right? And footnote it, because everyone, there's different expressions with different philosophers that everybody knows, right? Hobbes famously, it's a dog-eat-dog world that's nasty, brutish, and short, There's just some quotes that everyone ought to know. Locke refers to the mind as a tabula rasa at birth, right? A blank slate, and experience writes on it, and so on. So there's lots of interesting quotes out there that no one has to actually go find the resource for it. Everyone knows it, so there's no problem. What if you just rephrase it in your own words, though? Then you could get away with it seeming like it's your ideas, but the thing is, if it's really something that you read, you should still give that reference. I think part of it is, as Americans, I think we grew up proud of our independence, and we don't want to give credit to all the people that we're reading. We want to act like, well, we knew this ourselves. But that's wrong. What we should do is actually give credit to as many people as possible, because if you quote just one person, that's plagiarism. If you quote lots of people, that's research. Yes? You've heard that one before. I don't even have to quote where I got that quote from. Right? Because you've probably heard that before. So I have fun with this. There are some puzzles, though. So for example, what if you copied something you found on the internet and then ran it through Ringworks? This is called the dialectizer. So you can take a paragraph and you can put it here. Click redneck.
Extra credit for that.
What would be neat is if they'd have a reverse way of doing it. So if I got some redneckese, I could put it in and then get, and now you've got, and it's not just redneck. You get jive, Cockney, Swedish chef. That's one of my favorites. A lot of bork, thrown in. Pig Latin, hacker, censor, I don't know. That's just fun. You could actually, over here, you could put an entire website into it, and it would give you that whole page completely redone in jive. It's just absolutely hilarious. But if you did that, if you took a paragraph of something, ran it through redneck, and then turned that in as part of your term paper, those are words, so they'd be perfectly fine, right? But would that be plagiarism? Or creativity of some sort?
Somebody else doing the work.
You still feel guilty? I'd still feel guilty. So a lot of people say that. So that
Well,
makes
if you
sense.
took St. Augustine's words or something and put them through there and then sent them to them, then that might be considered plagiarism.
Although that would be incredibly interesting. Especially if it was still in Latin.
Not in Pig Latin.
my head. Well, so I took this paragraph here that I wrote, actually, but you might ask if all my ideas come from someone else and I'm just mixing them up into my ideas, etc. I took that and I put it through Redneck and got, but you might ask, if all my ideas come from someone else and I was just mixing them up into my ideas, when can I ever write without trying to pin the blame for them on someone else? I don't know how good redneckish it is, but it just was fun. You should be laughing. This is supposed to be funny, right? This is another problem. So if we go here, this page is called the Postmodern Generator, and what happens every time you click on the link, a brand new, complete term paper is generated. And the thing is, now, so if I click on this again, refresh the page, right? Notice it's a totally different term paper. And it doesn't repeat. So if you took a term paper off of this site and then turned it in, there's no way the teacher will be able to find that it was plagiarized because it doesn't exist out on the internet. It only occurred once. But if you do that, besides being incredibly creative, probably only working in a postmodern literature class because of the nature of the writing. If you look at the way the paper reads. So the title of this one, well, let's go to the next one. Let's see what we get the next one. Textual discourse in the works of spelling. So the subdialectic paradigm of context and textual post-semanticist theory. Whew, man. If one examines textual discourse, one is faced with a choice: either accept structural dematerialism or conclude that culture is capable of deconstruction, but only if reality is equal to sexuality. Whoa. I have to think about that. Mostly because whenever I see the word sex, I get distracted. But it works in high schools too, by the way. But if you use it too often, you get kicked out of the high school. Which is why I don't teach at Chugiak High School anymore. And they were bored to death. We were reading Romeo and Juliet. And I pointed, they were falling asleep. And I said, when he says his sword is standing up, as he's lying on the, Mercutio, right? And the sword is rising up. That's sex. And their eyes all just opened up and they started reading it. So it does work, but you can't use it too often. So I went and I took a page from here years ago, and I got this Foucault's Power Relations in the Neo-Textual Paradigm of Discourse. But I think you would agree that if I just turned that in as my term paper, that would be plagiarism, and I'd feel guilty. Plus, I've cheated myself because I haven't had the practice of writing my own paper, right? Which is the main thing you're getting out of this, right? Not the grade, it's the practice that you're getting, right? Well, I took this and I ran it through Redneck. See how much fun you can have? And I'm convinced if I turned this in, I would not get a good grade, but it would be hilarious. And it is my work. I use 2 interesting tools out there in order to create this sloppy mess. I can take credit for this. I can even say, hey, I got this by going here and then here, and look what I got. And, and the world would accept it, because that's the way the world is. There's a lot of this, that website, by the way, that creates the term papers is They give you the code if you would like to use that yourself, but you'd have to use it on a Unix server. That's the kind of code it is, right? But it came from a doctor named Sokol. I'm in the dark. I've got to find where the letters are. There we are. So, Alan Sokol thought that postmodern journals were absolute nonsense. He read a few and he thought, this is just garbage. It's not real writing. I mean, it's just nonsense. And he came up with an idea. He created an algorithm, a computer algorithm, took a download of a whole bunch of postmodern phrases, somehow the data, authors and things, put it together, ran it through the algorithm. It came out with one of these term papers, basically. He submitted it to the Postmodern Journal, and they accepted it for publication. In fact, they were thrilled because they had never had a postmodern article written by a scientist before. So they were all thrilled that they had converted the scientists to postmodernism. And at the same time that the article came out in their magazine that he had written, he had another article in a science journal published that explained what he had done. And the scientists were all, yay for Alan, he's convinced the world that postmodernism is bunk, right? And, but the postmodernists were reading the article and said, but it's a really good article. What the heck? Meanwhile, a couple of grad students at MIT took his Dada engine, they called it, right, and loaded it with phrases from science journals, developed a science article that they sent to his science journal, and the science journal accepted it. So what have we learned from this?
It's a question what we've been reading in anything that's been published before.
And by the way, a lot of people have learned a lot from this because AI, artificial intelligence, is taking over writing. More and more of the stuff we'll be reading will be just being blurted out by computers based on income, run through the filters, out it goes, including reports for BP, I'm sure, as well as, I think how much money it's going to save them. A computer will do this for basically maintenance costs, whereas if you're doing that stuff, you're getting 150 grand plus benefits, right? So they're going to save a lot of money by having computers doing all the writing. And we'll get some silly stuff, but for the most part, it will be sufficient, I'm sure, and it will improve. So that's interesting. But what it also tells us is that when you're getting out of this process of taking courses and writing term papers, is that you're learning the algorithm. You're embedding that algorithm of how to do it correctly in your head, and understanding where the data comes for the specific papers that, right, the research, right? So you're basically programming yourself to do what this program will do instantaneously. It might take you a week or two. Actually, I'm sure some of my students do it the last night before the paper's due. Oh, I've got a term paper due tomorrow. It's an all-nighter. Oh, good, I'm done at 3. I still get some sleep. And I get a term paper that's mostly St. Paul. But that's okay. So this is all fun. So I don't really know what plagiarism is. I don't check, really. I say that I check for papers for plagiarism. Mostly you can tell, because you get, it's like when you're talking with someone. If we were having a conversation, and all of a sudden you ended up with do you have a British accent?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. No.
But if all of a sudden you sounded like you had a British accent, I would go, she's possessed. Some Brit just took over her, right? Well, the same thing happens with your term paper. You're reading along. Wait a minute, this isn't that same person, right? that happens. You know, so, and the person you're cheating really is yourself. Because what you're really paying me for is for you to be a different person after the course is over than you started. That sounds weird, but you know, in a sense, each course is supposed to change us somewhat so that you start off as a naive freshman and you end up a sophisticated asshole. No, an educated person. There, an educated person. Right? Sorry about that. The president has just been screwing with my language, you know. I never used to say the word shit in class, and now it's like the thing, you know. It's like the cat's meow, which we don't say anymore. I don't know what we say anymore. Okay, so I will also, and the basic format all covered, but what are you writing about? Well, so I have some suggestions, my thoughts. I can't click on this because it's not that kind of screen. But if I click on thoughts, I just basically say, please don't bore me to death with, the stuff that everybody knows, right? What I'm interested in is your thoughts on it. So why was Socrates an asshole? Maybe you disagree. Maybe you think, well, actually Socrates was kind of a normal teacher for today. But for Athens, he was an asshole. Why is that the case? Well, because they've never had this before. Never had critical thinking. The elite in the town wanted their kids to grow up and behave and do what they were told and win arguments, but they wanted them to win arguments in the right ways. And Socrates comes in and starts asking them serious questions that they didn't have answers for, and the kids really enjoyed that. And as a result, whenever one of their teachers was teaching them something, the kids would start asking them these questions that they couldn't answer and making fun of their teachers. And I was like, whoa, that's totally disruptive to the status quo. Who did this? Socrates. So we'll get him. Here, drink this, and that's, we actually have a video of this happening.
And Socrates?
Yes.
Socrates, the trial is over. Here's your hemlock. Ah, thank you. Well, what was the verdict? When do I get out of here? Socrates, the verdict was death. Death? You gotta be kidding me. For what? For teaching the youth wisdom. Well, I'll take it all back. Call him in here. I'll renounce everything. Let's get out of here. Let's go get some Chinese food. But Socrates, you drank the hemlock. For what? It's poisonous. It is? Since when? Didn't you know hemlock is poisonous? I do now. Look, I only know general things. What is truth? What is justice? I never learned details. I don't know what is poisonous and what is not poisonous. It's the kind of thing that irritates me about you guys. Oh. All right. Look, I'm going to die. So what? When does this stuff take effect? 2, 3 years? 2, 3 minutes? What a lousy day this was. All right. I'm going to lay here, and I'm going to die. You know what's going to happen? You guys are going to go out, and you'll have dinner, and you'll sit and stare at each other. I was the only one who ever talked in this whole group. It was always Socrates, what is truth? Socrates, what is the nature of the good? Socrates, what should I order? Socrates, what are you having? And not once did anyone ever say, Socrates, hemlock is poison.
By the way, I was kidding. This really isn't Socrates. You could tell because they didn't have color. This was actually made in the 60s, I think. So this is sort of a drug reference here.
How do you do that? What? Make your body like rubber.
They didn't have rubber. That's a clue, right?
Wow. You know, I could eat 1,000 chocolate chip cookies right now.
Is that a pot reference?
I'm okay. I feel better. Must have been just a passing. Righto. Come to me. Yes, master.
I love the bird.
What did he say? He said, "Come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Daylight come, and me wanna go home."
So you know Socrates is famous when they do comic skits about his demise. Boring. I hate boring. I think boredom is the root of all evil. So if you can make your term paper interesting by writing about things that interest you. If it interests you, it'll interest me. If it bores you to death, it'll bore me to death. Pretty much. I'm pretty sure that would be the case, right? So I love that picture. When I was checking, my last duty station was in Hawaii, and as I was clearing quarters there, they had that on the counter, and I asked them if they had a copy of it that I could have, and they gave me a copy. And now it's all over the internet. I don't know if it was my fault or what. I actually colored that one though. So the one they gave me was black and white. So. So term paper, 25%. And quizzes, I will ask quizzes every class. So for example, because we have 2 sessions, and so we start at 6, so really at 7:15 I should break. Is that about right? Well, actually, you could go out if you need to for any, if you feel free. If you're going to miss class, please email me or something. And even if you're going to leave early, you might want to email me ahead of time, just letting me know that you'll be leaving because of whatever. Just so, mostly I worry that I might have said something that offended you and you got up and left, right? So if I do say something that bothers you, give me grief. I was raised Roman Catholic. I'm used to punishment. I had nuns for the first 8 years, and I had Augustinian monks for the next, for high school. So I'm used to being beaten up. No, not really beaten up, but the nuns did use the ruler on the knuckles. They really did. Scariest thing was first grade. I had Sister Mary Immaculate, and I apparently talked too much in class. And so at one point, she called me up to the front and told me that if I talked again, I would have my mouth stapled closed. I don't think teachers are allowed to say that to their kids in class today. Well, apparently I talked again, so she called me up and asked me to get the stapler out of her drawer, and I was like, oh, you know how you would be, right? You know, because I was just picturing those staples, you know. And she said, if you promise never to talk again, I was, oh. So I sat down. That's why I talk so much now. So that was this. She was also the nun that first gave me my existential crisis. Because the very first day, she was calling William Jamison, and we're all sitting there, 50 of us. We're all sitting there looking at her and thinking, you know, boy, this stupid kid doesn't even know his own name, because there was no person saying that they were William Jamison. She finally figured it out. She came down and looked at me and said, are you William Jamison? I said, no, sister, my name is Billy. She said, you're William. And I got home and I told my mom. She called me William. And my mom laughed at me and said, you are William. I wasn't who I thought I was. But so I will ask quiz questions so twice a night, because we have 2 sessions, right? First quiz question should be fun. What are the 10 Commandments? And what I ask is that you email me those. What are the 10 Commandments? If you get the chance, I don't think you'll have the chance in our break, but in fact, we'll go over them, so I'll ruin it for you, but I'll explain why this, I think, is a fun quiz question. Let's take a break, and roughly about, what, 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Whatever. Is that good? I think that's the first part of what? I'm going to use this time to go down and